again, this isn't an academic paper. I just want to share some experiences that I've had about engaging with UN Special Rapporteurs. And again, like Jessie, acknowledging that there's probably other people in the room and in this online space who have more experience, but I hope that, you know, what I discuss will be the opening for a broader conversation where other people can also share their own experience, so we can strategize about how we can engage strategically in this space. And just also to flag that a lot of my PowerPoints take words and sentences directly from the UN website, just to sort of share that information. So for those who don't know, but I think this is pretty well known, the special procedures are basically independent human rights experts. They have mandates to report and advise on human rights issues from a thematic or country specific perspective. I didn't realize quite how many there are. So there's currently 45 thematic mandates and 14 country mandates. There's lots of different issues that you can get involved with. In some cases, it's an individual who's given that mandate. In other cases, it's a working group made up of a number of individuals. These positions are not paid. They're elected for 3-year mandates, and those can be renewed for another 3 years. And so these working groups of special rapporteurs can do certain things, namely undertake country visits if they're invited to do so by the country. They can act on individual cases of reported violations and concern by sending communication to states and others. They can contribute to the development of international human rights standards, and that's specifically in sort of annual reports. You'll often have an annex that might be developing new guidelines in a specific area, so around forced displacement and eviction, or in 2018, the Special Rapporteur on the Right to a Healthy Environment developed the framework principles on that right, and they can engage in advocacy, raise public awareness, and provide advice for technical cooperation. So one thing that they do is they are required to do annual reports. It's often a biannual report, with one report going to the General Assembly and one report going to the Human Rights Council. And basically, these annual reports seek to sort of explore one particular thematic area related to the mandate. And you can look there at the themes of the reports presented in 2022. And so generally in preparing these sort of reports, the special rapporteurs will seek input from a broad range of states, civil society and experts, either through expert panel consultations or open calls for input. And so I recently had the experience of being invited by the Special Rapporteur on Contemporary Forms of Racism to attend an expert consultation that she was hosting for a report that's just been presented to the General Assembly on climate change, ecological crisis and racial injustice. And it was, you know, a fantastic opportunity to sort of make a short submission, a written submission as well as an oral submission in that space, to hear what other experts are saying, and then a great honour to be sort of cited in that report, and to know that, you know, your academic contributions then are sort of influencing these reports that then, you know, have wider advocacy influence and circulation. I've also currently being employed as a consultant for the Special Rapporteur on the Right to Housing, who's preparing a report on housing and climate change that will be presented to the Human Rights Council next year in March. And so we're just in the process of finalising that report. And as part of that process, they put out a questionnaire with a list of various questions that sought input then with responses to those questions. So again, all civil society groups, state groups, national human rights institutions, and other actors, so academics, can respond to that questionnaire. So that's another way in which you can have input into those sort of processes. And then we also had a range of consultations as part of that process. There were 3 regional meetings, one for Middle East and Europe, one for the Americas, and one for Asia Pacific. And again, you know, civil society groups are able to register to attend those consultations and put forward issues that they think are important in relation to that report. And, you know, as part of my role as a consultant, I wrote up meeting reports from all those meetings. So again, issues that are presented there are reflected in those meeting reports, and then in most cases reflected then in the final report as well. We also held an expert consultation. We also held a consultation with national human rights, with states and national human rights bodies, as well as a consultation just the other night with business actors and private actors, and there's a forthcoming consultation with academic experts. So there's multiple different ways there in which people can get involved in the sort of development of these sort of reports, particularly if it's an area that's, you know, of your own, that you're doing research on. And it's incredibly helpful, you know, in preparing this report, it's been incredibly helpful to receive submissions that are really engaged and have, you know, really well referenced information. It's, you know, again, you know, special rapporteurs can't be on top of everything. And so they really rely on this input from academics and civil society groups to present a really comprehensive picture of that particular area. So they're like one to flag, you know, those multiple ways of getting involved in those annual reports, through those expert consultation, through calls for input, but then also through this sort of process of acting as a consultant. For a special rapporteur, they'll often employ an expert consultant to assist with the preparation of a thematic report. And like I said, I'm currently working with the Special Rapporteur on the right to adequate housing. It's been a really interesting experience that I'm happy to talk about. More, again, sort of quite a different genre of writing than what we're used to in writing in an academic audience. And very clear, you know, constraints, word constraints, as well as other constraints in how you write things, but also, you know, that process of really contributing towards, you know, a more policy orientated document that you know will circulate and potentially influence the way in which states might approach, you know, building climate resilience into how they think about the right to housing or addressing the impacts of climate change on the right to housing. Another way in which you can get involved with special rapporteurs is communications. I think this is in some ways sort of seems similar to what Jessie was talking about with the simplified reporting procedures. Basically, these are letters that are sent to the mandate holders. So basically, communications are letters sent by the special procedures to governments and others. But basically, they're prompted by a submission that can be made by any individual group, civil society organisation, submitting information to those special procedures. And so you can submit information to a special rapporteur around an issue of concern. So, for example, you know, thinking about doing something about, you know, post-flooding housing reconstruction or post-bushfire housing reconstruction in Australia, that you submit some information to the mandate holder, and then basically they respond by writing to the government and asking the government a series of questions that they want further information on about how they're addressing what they're doing in relation to these issues. And so I wasn't previously aware of these communications. So for people who aren't here, again, there's a website there where you can see all the different communications that have been done. There's quite a number that have been Concern Australia. You see there some around Australian citizens in northern Syria, for example, some around COVID vaccines and vaccine inequality, as well as other issues. And then basically this is what the communication from a special rapporteur looks like. This was one around toxic waste, that they sort of say, this is the information that we received. They write to the state concerned, this is the information we received, and then they ask for further information. So obviously the sources of information are kept confidential in the case of these sort of communications, whereas the submissions for a report are, unless someone requests them to be confidential, those submissions are all made available online. And then again, so it can be used, you know, in a similar sort of way, like this sort of reporting process is to push the state to say, look, someone's watching you on these matters. We want to find out more information about what you're doing here, in a similar way that you might, you know, ask questions in Parliament, and to again put the state on awareness that they're being scrutinised. But again, I think these sort of communications really can be used most strategically when it's part of a much broader advocacy campaign on a particular issue. So it's sort of one tool in a much broader toolbox. The other ways in which you can engage with the special rapporteurs or special procedures is that the mandate holders carry out country visits to assess the situation of human rights at the national level. So they send a request to a government and then are invited by the government to attend. And during those missions, they'll meet with national local authorities, including members of the judiciary, parliamentarians, members of national human rights institutions, and government organisations, civil society organisations, etc., and others. So including academics as well, who want to present information about the status of particular human rights relevant to that mandate in the country. So again, you can look on the website and find out about forthcoming country visits. So as we're aware, the working group on arbitrary detention just postponed their visit to Australia shamefully because they weren't given access to prisons and detention centres in New South Wales and Queensland. But there's a forthcoming visit by the working group on people of African descent on the 12th to the 20th of December, according to the website, that I wasn't even aware of. So it is an interesting thing to look out for. And then to sort of think, okay, is there any way in which my work relates to that? And, you know, can I somehow engage with that special procedure and the mandate holders while they're here to try and influence the country report that will come out, or provide input into that country report. And then finally, concluding, I want to flag that another thing that, you know, people in this room who have considerable experience and expertise in the in different human rights should consider, you know, putting your hand up to become a special rapporteur or become a member of one of these working groups. There is, you know, as I say, there's information about the process on the website. It is a transparent and competitive process. You put in an application, response to call of applications. There's a consultative group, which is composed of high-level representatives from the 5 regional groups. I think this is where a bit of the politics about regional representation comes into it. And then, you know, a selection being made by the President of the Human Rights Council, and then that being endorsed by the council. And here I've just got there the some of the general criteria that are required. So obviously expertise, relevant qualifications, independence, impartiality, personal integrity, established competence, and that flexibility, readiness and availability of time to sort of spend, you know, a considerable amount of time for that 3-year period doing that sort of work. So I hope that's just been a helpful overview of some of the different ways in which you can engage with those special procedures. And again, I'm happy to speak a bit more to my own experiences in the question time, but I hope too that other people who might have their own experiences in engaging might be able to share some of those experiences that we can all learn from as well. Thanks.